Now some news from West Asia. Two sworn enemies are holding talks, secret ones. The United States and Iran. Reports say their officials met in Oman last month. They held indirect talks, meaning they were not face-to-face. Oman was ferrying the messages between both sides. But what was the discussion about? The Iran nuclear deal. Joe Biden promised to revive it after becoming president. He tried for close to 1 year, but he failed miserably. So now he's trying again. He's up for re-election next year. He's also under pressure from the Israelis. They are threatening to strike Iran unless the nuclear program is paused. So what does Joe Biden do? Try to secure an informal deal, sort of like a mini agreement. Now the semantics are important here. A formal nuclear deal will have to be ratified by the US Congress. And right now that looks unlikely. American lawmakers do not want to make any concessions to Iran. They're also accusing Tehran of arming Russia. So Congress is no-go, which is why the White House is playing it safe. They're talking about, quote-unquote, an understanding or an informal deal, something that won't need Congress approval. Listen to this spokesperson of the State Department.
We continue to use diplomatic engagements to pursue all of these goals in full coordination with our allies and partners. But as I said yesterday, with respect to Iran's nuclear program, there is no deal. The reports that there are a deal or some agreement or some other description, however you want to describe it, are not true. Sorry to retread ground.
Pretty vehement, almost as if by design, but multiple reports suggest otherwise. They quote US and Iranian officials confirming that a deal is indeed in the works. Some in Tehran are calling it a political ceasefire. So what's in it for both sides? Well, the US is hoping that Iran will pause uranium enrichment. 90% is weapons-grade uranium. Iran is at 60%. The informal deal could keep it there at 60%. Iran may also release American citizens detained in the country, and Biden would love that before elections. Him at the tarmac receiving Americans released from Iran. Perfect campaign photo. The deal could also see Iran stopping its attacks on US contractors in Syria. And what do they get in return? The Iranians. Broadly speaking, they're asking for three things: sanctions relief to sell oil, unlocking of frozen assets, and stopping the seizure of their oil tankers. And some of this, by the way, is already happening. Last week, Iran paid $2.7 billion, Iraq paid $2.7 billion to Iran. Now, Baghdad owed this money for buying gas and electricity. The purchases are old, but the payment came only last week. Why is that? Because sanctions were preventing Iraq from paying Iran. Last week, the Americans waived some of it, so Baghdad could finally pay up. Similar payments were also held up in South Korea, or are held up in South Korea. Seoul owes about $7 billion to Iran, and that too is now on the table. But how close are we to securing this deal? Some Israeli officials called it imminent, but we've heard that before. In 2021, there was a lot of chatter about the nuclear deal. European officials kept saying it was only days away. In the end, nothing happened. This time, President Biden faces even more challenges. The chairman of the US Foreign Affairs Committee has written to him. He says any agreement must be submitted to the Congress, even informal ones. So chances are there could be a legal showdown. And Iran is wary of that, because what's happening now is like a déjà vu. In 2015, Iran placed their trust on the White House. They signed the nuclear deal. The next year, another president came to office and he walked out of the deal. Now there is another attempt, and just like 2015, this is an election year in America. And who is likely to challenge Joe Biden? The same president who walked out of the deal, Donald Trump. More than enough reason to be concerned. But for Biden, even an informal deal is big. He's losing most of his allies in West Asia. And Israel is among the few remaining. If they feel that the US is not doing enough, they could go rogue, maybe even strike Iran themselves. So Joe Biden needs to get this right, because who knows, maybe he won't have a chance after next year. For our next story, let me begin with a folk tale about a hen that laid golden eggs. Maybe you've heard it before. Once upon a time, a farmer had a hen. It laid a golden egg every day. The farmer assumed that the hen must contain a lump of gold inside its body. So he killed the hen, but he found no gold. And this is what he was left with: no gold and no daily golden egg. That's the story. Now imagine a twist. The farmer has a dead hen and he starts ticketing people to come and see it, to see the dead hen. He starts charging people so they can witness the corpse of a bird that was once lucrative. I know it sounds grim and odd, but that's exactly what's happening in Afghanistan, except here, instead of a golden hen, it's Buddhist statues. And instead of the farmer, it is the Taliban. The terrorist group that now rules Afghanistan, the Taliban. Let me show you what they're up to. These are the great Buddhas of Bamiyan in Afghanistan. They were priceless artifacts, thought to be the two biggest standing Buddhas on the planet. They awed travelers across the world for 15 centuries. Some 800 years ago, they survived the wrath of Genghis Khan. They managed to withstand his cannon fire, but what they could not manage to survive was the Taliban. Taliban founder Muhammad Omar declared the Buddhas false gods. He said these idols have been gods of the infidels. And this is what followed. The Taliban destroyed these statues in 2001, bit by bit, with hammers, with spades, with explosives, ignoring pleas from all over the world. And this cemented the Taliban's image on the world stage as uncompromising extremists. Now the Taliban are back in power and the Bamiyan Buddhas are gone. Only 2 gaping holes remain, where the statues once stood. And you know what the Taliban now say? The Buddhas should not have been bombed. The Taliban are calling them an important part of Afghanistan's cultural heritage. They're inviting tourists to Bamiyan and selling tickets to visit the bombed site. For Afghans, the price is 58 cents. For foreigners, it's $3.45. Quite the shift, right? The golden question is why, and the simple answer is the golden hen. I'll explain. Afghanistan is one of the least developed countries in the world. Its economy continues to deteriorate. It faces international sanctions. It is losing humanitarian aid. It needs money desperately. And it sees the remains in Bamiyan as a potential source of revenue. The golden hen, even dead, can be lucrative. But are people actually buying it? The Taliban government thinks so. Last year, it says some 200,000 registered tourists visited Bamiyan. They spent an average of $57 each, and Bamiyan is one of the poorest regions in the impoverished country. So this seems like a decent deal, but apparently it's not good enough. Because these Buddha cavities receive mainly 2 types of visitors. Some are Taliban soldiers themselves stationed nearby, others are educated urban Afghans, mostly still angry at the Taliban. What the regime wants is to draw cultural enthusiasts and archaeologists from abroad. Can they pull it off though? It's hard to say at this point. The Taliban may want to position themselves as the champions of culture and make some money off it. But drawing foreign tourists will be a challenge. Speaking of challenges, the NATO is facing one, and I'm not talking about Russia. I'm talking about the drama over Sweden's application. They've been talking for months, but Sweden has still not been able to join the group. It has still not been able to convince the holdouts, Turkey and Hungary. The 2 nations are refusing to give Sweden the nod, and this is a challenge that must be overcome because to join the NATO, all members have to agree. So what will it take for Turkey and Hungary to relent? Well, the US is on the job now. It is using the old carrot and stick approach. For Turkey, the Americans are offering the F-16 carrot. For Hungary, they have a military stick. A US senator has blocked a $735 million arms sale to Hungary. Our next report has the details.
I, from the Swedish side, argue that we have done enough to justify ratification of the Swedish application. We haven't reached a conclusion in that area, and we have agreed to continue the talks ahead of Vilnius, and then we can see. And I don't speculate when that decision will be taken, and this is a Turkish decision and a Hungarian decision.
That was Oskar Stenström, Sweden's chief negotiator. What's he negotiating? Sweden's NATO membership. Stockholm had applied to join NATO last year, along with its neighbour Finland. And while Finland has already become a NATO member country, Sweden's accession is still uncertain. The biggest problem is Turkey. Newly re-elected President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has blocked Sweden's bid for months now. Erdogan has a bone to pick with Stockholm. It's over what he calls Kurdish terrorists. Groups of Kurds fighting for independence in Turkey had found refuge in Sweden, and Ankara wanted Stockholm to give them up, which it has. Sweden enacted a new anti-terror law recently. It targets these groups that have upset Erdogan. Stockholm is also extraditing Kurds to placate Turkey. But it seems that Erdogan has shifted the goalposts. He now says that Sweden must stop what he calls anti-Turkey protests conducted by the Kurdish groups. That's of course a blatant violation of the right to free speech. And besides, Sweden has complied with Turkey's previous demands. You can imagine that Stockholm is starting to get frustrated. But maybe there's another reason Erdogan continues to hold out. He's eyeing a tantalizing prize: F-16 fighter jets and modernization kits from the US. US-Turkey defense ties have been strained for a while now. Washington has given Ankara the cold shoulder ever since it bought defense equipment from Moscow. This was in 2019. So, Erdogan believes he can use Sweden's NATO bid as leverage to start buying American arms again. And US President Joe Biden seems to be playing ball. While speaking about Erdogan last month, Biden said, and I quote, "He still wants to work on something on the F-16s. I told him we wanted a deal with Sweden, so let's get that done." While this game of the Price is Right continues with Turkey, the US isn't playing games when it comes to Hungary. The Eastern European nation is also sitting on Sweden's bid, but for more personal reasons. Reports say Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán is in a huff. He's annoyed that Sweden accused him of curbing media freedom, the rule of law and democracy. A host of other Western nations have criticized Orbán, but Sweden is the country that needs something from Hungary. It needs Orbán's nod to join NATO. And Orbán is flexing his veto power, perhaps in the hopes of a heartfelt apology. But it seems the US doesn't want to wait for Orbán's hurt feelings to heal. It's showing Hungary the stick. US Senator Jim Risch has blocked a $735 million arms sale to the country. He clearly stated it was over Hungary blocking Sweden's NATO bid. Hungary has hit back by saying it wasn't expecting the equipment anyway. But the move confirms that patience is running thin in Washington.
So we believe, and you've heard from this president multiple times, that we believe Sweden should become a NATO member as soon as possible. That is what the president has said. He has shown his support. That is what we've seen from Congress as well. And so, look, we're going to continue to stay steadfast.
The next NATO summit is on the 11th of July. Sweden wants to officially be welcomed during that summit. It's a race against the clock. Sweden's backers are employing every trick in the book to get its membership done by that deadline. Will they succeed? We'll keep you updated as this unfolds.
Drones are hard power. There's nothing subtle or graceful about lethal flying machines. But hard power can only get you so far. You also need soft power. Some countries organically develop it, others just buy it. And seems like sports is on everyone's shopping list. West Asia is leading the way. They're using petrodollars to buy sports clubs and leagues. Manchester United could be the latest. They're in talks with a Qatari businessman, Manchester United, and this businessman is the son of their former prime minister, so it's pretty much a government-backed deal. How much is Qatar offering? $6 billion to buy the whole club. But there's a rival bid on the table. It's come from British billionaire Jim Ratcliffe. Now, reports say the Qatari offer is better. So right now, the club is considering granting exclusivity to Qatar. What does that mean? Exclusivity means the club can only negotiate with Qatar. The other buyers are out for that period. It's certainly a good sign for Qatar. They could soon own one of the most iconic clubs in football. It's massive, but it's not unprecedented. Gulf countries do own multiple clubs already. The UAE owns Manchester City. A Saudi group owns Newcastle United, and a Qatari businessman owns PSG. At least these are clubs. In the case of golf, Saudi Arabia has bought the entire sport, and I'm not even joking. Golf was run by a non-profit called PGA. They contracted players, and they ran all the major events across the world. But last year, Saudi Arabia launched their own league. It's called Live Golf. One by one, they poached PGA players. They offered them hundreds of millions of dollars. At first, the PGA objected. They filed legal cases against players who joined Live Golf. But now, they've done a U-turn. Earlier this month, PGA and Live Golf decided to make peace. They're calling it a merger. But let's be real. This is a hostile takeover by Saudi Arabia. There are two obstacles, though. I mentioned that PGA was non-profit. As a result, they paid no taxes in the United States. But Congress wants to change that. American politicians want to strip PGA of its tax-exempt status, and that could affect Riyadh. Secondly, the US Department of Justice is probing this merger. They fear it could limit competition, perhaps violate antitrust laws. Either of these could derail the merger. Now, if you're sitting in India and thinking it's only golf, well, think again. Saudi Arabia is also coming after cricket. They're planning something like the IPL. Reports say the International Cricket Council, the ICC, will soon sanction it. Now, cricket leagues are not new. Australia has them. So do South Africa, England and Pakistan. But none of them come close to the IPL, and that's where Saudi Arabia is different. Their league could potentially cannibalize the IPL. How? By contracting Indian players. Now, we know the Indian board, the BCCI, does not allow Indian players to compete abroad. They play only in the IPL. Saudi Arabia wants to change that. They're looking to offer all-year contracts to Indian players, basically make cricket like football. Clubs will come first, countries second. Take any sport, and this is what's happening. Saudi Aramco is one of the biggest sponsors in Formula One. Some Gulf states are also shopping for NBA teams. It's an unprecedented sports takeover, one that covers every sport and every league, which also means there is a lot of criticism. You see, these clubs are part of a legacy. So the argument is toxic Gulf states are buying up that legacy. But the clubs will be tainted by the purchase, which is a fair argument. Sports washing is happening all around us. But let's not pretend all the previous owners were symbols of purity. There were enough shady characters going around. Meet Donald Sterling. He owned NBA team Los Angeles Clippers for 30 years. He's been accused of sexual harassment and racism. In fact, he used the N-word to describe his players. Sterling holds a unique record in the US. He was federally prosecuted for racism. Imagine that. Another example is Silvio Berlusconi, the former Italian Prime Minister who passed away this week. He owned football club AC Milan. His controversies have their own Wikipedia page. Sexual harassment, underage sex, financial irregularities, praising Mussolini. The list is pretty long. Then you have Russian oligarchs. They own clubs across Europe. Roman Abramovich owned Chelsea from 2003 to 2022. Others include AS Monaco, Sydney FC, and AFC Bournemouth. Nobody objected until Russia invaded Ukraine. So my point is this: sports washing is not new. Rich and problematic men have always dominated sports. Now there are rich, problematic, and Arab men. And I'm not saying that justifies it. I'm only saying that the outrage should have started decades ago. The politics of sports is all about one thing: money. Why did these club owners sell to Gulf states in the first place? Why did they not protect the legacy? Because money. We used to say that sports is a vehicle for change, for reform, for activism. But today, it's a political pawn. If you have the money, the pawn is yours. To live is to suffer. This is a famous quote by Friedrich Nietzsche. Many would agree. Now, this suffering can take various forms. But for the Chinese, it often takes the avatar of what they call white people food. Seriously, that's what they have named Western packed lunches: white people food. Plain ingredients like raw vegetables, sliced meats, and crackers. The Chinese are trying this food, then letting their innermost emotions run free by roasting the meals, not in the way you'd imagine. They say, this is the lunch of suffering. Or this meal shows what it's like to be dead, and this trend is going viral. But is it simply to poke fun? Or does it hold a deeper meaning? Our next report tells you.
This is a viral video of a woman on a train in Switzerland. She's eating a bag of lettuce with ham and a packet of mustard. For many, this isn't a big deal, but for the users on Chinese social media, this food is lawless and outrageous, or the lunch of suffering. They claim even a rabbit would kick away this food. This video garnered so much criticism online, it sparked a culinary trend. Now the Chinese, both at home and abroad, are trying white people food. Yes, that's what they're calling it. They're trying Western-packed lunch, which is usually eaten in Europe, the US, and Australia. Think veggies, crackers, cold cuts, boiled eggs, and the occasional piece of fruit. After what they call suffering this food, they're letting their inner Gordon Ramsay run wild by going online and expressing their critique on Chinese blogs, and doing so quite unabashedly. One user said he saw a woman buy raw sliced mushrooms, then eat it at the supermarket. He says he was dumbfounded. Another user shared their colleague's lunch. It was baby carrots and spinach, and went on to ask how anyone can be energetic after eating such food. But if you still lack clarity, one TikTok user clearly explained what white people food means. First, it has no spices. Why? The user says it's because the food doesn't prioritize enjoyment. Next, it involves minimal preparation. And lastly, it's eaten at work or school. So once people get back home, they can finally eat so-called normal food and get their life back. The user really didn't mince their words. But why are Chinese people poking fun at Western food? Experts say because they're fascinated. Chinese people are used to labor-intensive food, where cooking involves a lot of different ingredients, like a mix of vegetables, meat, and grains with a bunch of different spices. So while Chinese people are used to an explosion of flavor, eating only crackers, cheese, and ham can seem jarring. But this food roasting session is more than just an online trend. It's a representation of how many people in China are making a shift from elaborate to simple eating, even if they're doing so with grudging acceptance. Why? Because of China's grueling work culture, where most workers follow what's called the 996. It involves working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. It sounds crazy, but 996 is pervasive in the country. Reports say people regularly work more than 300 hours every month, far surpassing legal limits in China. And the result? Apart from the physical and emotional toll of overwork, people lack the time to prepare elaborate meals, or even go out to grab food. So they're trying, albeit with difficulty, to accept simple meals, but also finding humor in the misery. Some say that while this trend may have made them suffer, it also helped them save time, money, and a lot of calories. But many aren't convinced. One commentator said, "If such a meal is to extend life, what is the meaning of life?"
And before we wrap, here's something that I want to share with you. Next week is going to be special. We are going to bring you special episodes of Vantage from the US as we cover Prime Minister Modi's state visit to America. Don't miss that. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Some 2,500 South Korean and American troops took part in joint exercises marking the 70th anniversary of the alliance between the two nations. Swedish climate activists put red handprints on Claude Monet's painting. Tourists in an Australian park were filmed fighting off a feisty kangaroo. And finally, what makes the 16th of June significant? Taking you back in history to the year 1976, when the Soweto uprising took place in South Africa. Police brutally attacked thousands of protesting school children, and this incident marked the beginning of the end of the apartheid system. We're leaving you with these images. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on Monday from the US.
F-15K 전투기 편대가 MK-80 원거리에서 통제하여 정밀하게 적을 타격 시 직접 충돌 및 공중 폭파 등 다양한
Situationen är akut. Pandemin var ingenting jämfört med klimatkollapsen. Det som kommer kan vi inte ens föreställa oss. Som sjuksköterska kommer inte att kunna ge er någon trygghet. Vi kommer också drabbas av svält, vattenbrist, konflikter.
Helen! This is a lady.